So one mistake that some people make is when they fill out the policy proposal form, at the last section, they'll say, okay, no, I've never had any of these.
Yeah.
No, sign off and submit. Singaporeans, we don't like to trouble people with additional
Oh, this is very
information.
true. This is absolutely
but
true.
I must say, for insurance, the approach should always be, when in doubt, disclose.
Yes.
Okay? Because if you don't disclose, then there can be a problem later on.
This is CNA's Money Talks podcast. I'm Andrea Heng. Welcome. So imagine you have a dispute with your bank or your insurance agent. Maybe they froze your account over something that you didn't do or you had nothing to do with it. Or your request to have a transaction waived because you didn't authorize it was denied. It's like a double whammy, right? Do you A, wave the white flag and then accept your powerlessness? B, go to the physical office to see someone and get some help? Or C, find a third party who can actually help you mediate and get a good outcome out of the situation? That's what we're going to be talking about today on the Money Talks podcast. My guest is Eunice Chua. She's CEO of the Financial Industry Disputes Resolution Center, better known as FIDReC.
Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. Now, first and foremost, I read that scam or fraud-related cases are the biggest that you've seen in the past year. So give us perhaps the most common cases that land on your desk.
Well, you're right that fraud and scam-related cases are a big issue now. More than a third of the claims filed at FIDReC are about fraud and scams. And the most common one is actually a little bit like what you mentioned in the intro. We call this type of case the compromised credentials because the customer has somehow these transactions done on their credit card or their debit card and they don't know how it happened.
Right.
They go to the bank, they ask for it to be waived. And in some situations, the bank says no, because from the bank's perspective, they see that, there was a 2FA keyed in, there was a OTP keyed in. And so from the bank's perspective, it is authorized.
Right.
But from the customer's perspective, they didn't do it.
Yeah.
Right? And so this is one of the most common scenarios. And another one would be the impersonation scams.
Oh, yes.
Where someone impersonates Singpost, Singtel.
I've had maybe like 5 different impersonation scammers call me already.
Yes.
All from various agencies.
Yeah, so that's a big issue. And I think it plays on Singaporeans, our very obedient nature. We want to comply. We want to be on the right side of the law. So when people tell us that, our account is under investigation because there's suspicious transactions, we may be involved in money laundering, we get triggered that sort of fear, right? The flight or freeze.
Yes.
And that causes us to engage with the scammer further. And then they really get your attention. They isolate you. And with that kind of pressure, many people succumb.
Yeah, and it's really unfortunate that they've become so sophisticated these days to impersonate anybody, and they scam you in all sorts of ways these days. So I want to put across a case study to you. It happened to a friend of mine, a friend's mom, really. So she had her bank account frozen, and the bank said that there was a $2,000 fraudulent transaction that was done in South Korea. At the time, though, the account holder, my friend's mom, she was actually in Bangkok. Obviously, there was no way for the transaction to have been done in South Korea if she was in Bangkok, right? So this went back and forth with the bank until the bank told her to lodge a complaint with FIDReC, you guys. So in this scenario, what exactly can FIDReC do?
Well, maybe I will start by saying what FIDReC does not do, because we do get quite a number of people who come to us with expectations that are not quite aligned with what we do.
Oh dear, okay.
So many people come to us because they think that we are some kind of an authority and we will tell the bank or tell the insurer to refund them the money or to make the waiver or to compensate.
That's understandable because you think, okay, I need help. You better help me and come up with a solution.
Yeah, so that's one extreme. And the other extreme is because many of the cases are referred by the bank or the insurer, they come to us thinking that we are the bank or the insurer. And then they're very mad at us.
No.
Okay, so just want to take the chance to clarify what we are and why the banks or insurers refer cases to us. Our role is to resolve disputes.
Right.
And our focus area is only between consumers and financial institutions that are licensed in Singapore. So we're actually not for profit.
Yeah.
We are designated by the Monetary Authority of Singapore to be a dispute resolution scheme for these consumer disputes against licensed financial institutions.
So you're a mediator.
Yes, that's our main job. We mediate, and mediate meaning that we hear both sides. So we'll let the customer come and tell us what happened from their perspective, what they deserve, what went wrong. But we will also hear the other side.
So in that scenario that I told you about, what then does FIDReC do?
So in that situation, when the customer comes to us, what they do is they'll file a complaint. This can be done online through our website. So it's a simple process.
Okay.
And they will tell us what the thing that went wrong was.
Okay.
Right? It's also good that they submit some documents. So if it's about some transaction, they would give us the statement with the transaction. And if they were in Bangkok and the transaction says South Korea, some conscientious consumers will also share with us their itinerary or maybe their passport to actually show and prove that they were not, and it was not in South Korea, it was not possible for them to have made the transaction there. So with that, we then turn this to the financial institution. In this case, it's a bank, and we will ask them to say, could you investigate and let us know from your perspective what happened? This is what the consumer says. We let the bank work on it for a while, and if they can resolve it very quickly with the customer, we call this our early resolution phase.
Okay.
So the moment we flip it over, if within 10 business days, the bank can work it out with the customer, then FIDReC doesn't get involved in the picture.
Right.
But if that still doesn't bring about any settlement or resolution, then we take on the complaint formally.
Okay.
We will appoint one of our staff to be a mediator. We will get that formal investigation report from the bank, and with that, we will start to analyze the case. So in the scam cases, we will try and put together a picture of how the transaction took place, how it could have gone through despite the customer thinking it was not authorized.
Okay.
So sometimes through conversations with the customer, we find out that maybe it was a family member or relative who possessed their details.
How often does that happen? How often is that the case though?
Well, I would say that it happens now and then when you might least expect it.
Okay.
yeah. It's not uncommon.
Right.
But often it might be because the customer has clicked on some link. We ask general questions just to try and get a sense of what might have happened. So we might ask, do you often do online shopping?
Right.
What are the common sites that you go to? Do you buy things off social media? And then through these conversations, sometimes we find that, then the customer has this realization. Yeah, just maybe about that time I did click on this link and there was this attractive deal, or I was playing this game and there was an in-app pop-up and I just clicked on it. So actually, it is quite scary that we can lose a lot of our information by just clicking on something and you may not realize it. But that has allowed some scammer to view maybe what is on your phone or to actually be able to gather what you key in on certain websites and so on. So that has led to this sort of compromised credential situation, right? Where the customer doesn't know what happened, but from the bank's perspective, this was proper, right? There was OTP keyed in.
Correct.
And
the
so
2FA
on.
was done and all that. And I think people don't realize just how absent-minded we can be in keying in these details because we're just so conditioned to the fact that you need to log into your social media platforms via these credentials. And that's enough for the scammer sometimes.
Yeah, these are both victims. So the customer has lost money. The money hasn't gone to the bank. The money has gone off to the scammer. So the bank has also, if they were to compensate the customer, it's kind of out of pocket.
Correct.
So what FIDReC does is, number one, we try and explore whether it's possible for any goodwill payment.
Okay.
Right? So even though technically, the credentials have been keyed in, but perhaps the scam was particularly sophisticated.
Right.
So perhaps, the customer's profile is someone who is more vulnerable. Right? Maybe this person does not often use, online banking or online services. Maybe there are some other mitigating factors, like a certain financial situation or illness. To be fair to the banks, they do take a broader view of things rather than just a very technical,
Sure.
it is unauthorized.
Sure.
So we do talk through these things and we try to see whether there can be a goodwill payment. Goodwill payment, it is not 100% recovery,
Sure.
right? Because often the bank will take the view that, well, it's out of goodwill. It's not that I did anything wrong. And so maybe I will take a portion of this loss. I'll share this loss with you, right?
But what happens when the customer isn't happy with the resolution in for example, the goodwill payment?
After mediation, if there is no agreement, right, there might be an offer, the offer might not be accepted. We have another stage of our process called adjudication, where we do have an independent neutral who will decide the case and say whether or not there is a valid claim or not. So our adjudicators are a pool of retired judges, senior lawyers, some retired industry professionals as well. And the adjudication can take place through a hearing.
Okay.
It can be online, in person, or even just based on a documentary review. We let the consumer choose the way that they feel is best for them. And this process is final. Okay, so that's important to note.
Okay.
That's the last thing that we could do at FIDReC, right?
Okay,
So
okay.
even if after the adjudication, the adjudicator says, well, based on what I see and from the evidence, the bank has no wrongdoing, and so I'm unable to allow your claim. Your claim is dismissed. The customer, if they still feel very strongly about it, they can still go to court.
Sure.
They can still go to arbitration or whatever other formal process they think is suitable.
Okay.
So actually, FIDReC is a very good chance for someone in a very affordable way because for mediation, it's free for the consumer. Adjudication, we do charge a nominal fee of $50 per claim plus GST. And that is just to make sure that the consumer is prepared to participate in the adjudication
That's
because
right.
they have to make some arguments as well.
Sure.
Yeah. So I think it's a good chance for someone at a very low cost to get a sense of whether or not they do have a valid claim, and that doesn't affect their legal rights too.
So, Eunice, give us a sense, if you can, of the timeline of the entire mediation process from start to finish. So, from the time that I file a complaint with FIDReC, for example, all the way to the final outcome, how long typically can that take?
Okay, I'll answer the question head on first and then explain the details.
Sure.
Typically 3 to 6 months.
Okay.
Okay, and how it works is the moment the complaint hits us, there is an early resolution period I mentioned where we alert the financial institution and see whether they can quickly resolve the dispute. So that's 10 business days.
Okay.
After that 10 business days, we then start looking formally at the complaint. We'll ask for the investigation report, start the mediation. So depending on how quickly people respond to us and, the fixing of dates and so on, this could take between 1 to 3 months. If a case goes further to adjudication, then this might take a little more time because the consumer will need to take time to prepare their submissions and then come for the hearing. And then after the hearing, we also have to wait for the adjudicator to review everything and prepare their decision, which we will share with the parties.
Okay.
The adjudication itself is about 3 months, not including the time the consumer needs to prepare their own submission. So sometimes people need a bit more time than that. That part can vary. So in short, maybe about 3 to 6 months.
Okay. Now, some of these disputes can involve insurance companies as well, I found out.
Yes.
What's the common issue here?
Yeah, so banks tend to be the most complained about type of financial institution.
That's right.
Not surprising.
I mean, it's where it hits you the hardest, right? Your pocket, it's literally my pocket of money.
Yes.
It hits
and
you hard.
It's a very everyday thing
Yeah.
that we, transact with credit cards online and so on. Insurers tend to be the second most complained about type of institution.
Okay.
And the claims are mainly around life insurance or health insurance.
Okay.
Common kinds of claims pertaining to health or medical insurance would be about claims rejections, where you have made a hospitalization claim, for example, and then the insurer rejects it. And you feel that that rejection is not reasonable and not fair to you. You can bring a claim to FIDReC and we can try and help to look into it as well
Okay.
and see whether we can mediate. And if that doesn't work, there's also the adjudication option.
Okay.
Another kind of common scenario for life insurance products would be where the return is not as expected. Right? So often there are policies such as endowment policies, and there is a projected return, there is a guaranteed return, but customers do feel they are entitled to what was projected, what was described to them.
So you put this number on paper, therefore I should be getting it.
So we do have a number of cases around those lines as well, where the returns are not as expected. But, it's good for all of us to know that, returns, there are guaranteed ones and non-guaranteed ones.
Yes.
So just pay attention to that.
Yeah, the fine print. Always take the fine print. So there's also financial institutions that take the form of virtual, right? There are digital banks out there. There are apps now. You name it, they have it, right? Is there a different process when it comes to dealing with a fintech company? Say you have a complaint against an online investment platform or an online banking platform, something like that?
The process is generally the same in that you file the complaint and then we'll do the mediation and adjudication. But one thing I do want to make sure everyone knows is that not all types of financial institutions are subscribers of FIDReC.
Okay. So you have, hang on, you have to be a subscriber of FIDReC in order to be able to have you mediate any complaint that involves them.
Yeah, so the structure is that there are certain licensed institutions in Singapore that the Monetary Authority of Singapore requires to subscribe to FIDReC.
Right.
So that consumers have access to dispute resolution at low cost.
So it's peace of mind for the customer as well.
Correct.
Okay.
But as you can imagine, this is limited to the licensed financial institution. So there could be online investment platforms that are offshore. They are not Singapore-based. We are not able to handle such complaints.
Okay.
And a practical reason is because, as you can imagine, mediation means that we do need that other party to cooperate with us.
Yes.
Right? So if we are not able to get a hold of them, they're not in Singapore, there is nothing that FIDReC is able to do as well. Yeah. So currently, the types of institutions you can complain about would be banks, life insurers, general insurers, capital markets licensees, financial advisors, insurance brokers, and the latest ones to join would be stored value e-wallets.
What other things should I know when I'm entering into a contract with anyone, right? Be it a financial product or otherwise. What should I be reading more carefully when I look at my medical insurance? Travel insurance is a big one because there's so many out there. How do I know what's covered and what's not and what I can claim, right?
Let's start with medical insurance because that's a big thing for everybody.
Yes.
Right? Everybody should have, I hope.
I hope so too.
I think the key things to look out for are, number one, the payment terms.
Okay.
Right? How much you have to pay, how frequently. Some disputes arise at FIDReC because people are under the impression that they can renew this policy indefinitely, but actually under the policy terms, there is kind of an endpoint at a certain age. Okay, so things like that. Payment terms, how long? Another thing to look out for medical insurance in particular is what the benefits are and whether there are any exclusions. So not all insurance policies are equal. So you can't compare just based on what is lowest cost.
Yes,
right?
please don't.
Because some policies may cover certain conditions, others may not. Yeah, and then exclusions. Because insurance contract in Singapore under the law is a special type of contract. It's called a contract of utmost good faith.
Okay.
Which means that under the law, if you, the insured, do not fully disclose information to the insurer, the consequences can be quite dire. So one mistake that some people make is when they fill out the policy proposal form, at the last section, they'll say, okay, no, I've never had any of these things.
Yeah.
No, sign off and submit. But we've had cases where later on, when the claim arises and the insurer gets the medical report, they realize that, this person actually has diabetes. This wasn't declared in the proposal form.
Not unless I discover that I had diabetes at that screening. what then happens, right? I mean,
Yeah.
who's the correct one in this case?
So in the case I have in mind, what happened was the consumer did know that they had the condition of
Sure.
diabetes. They thought it was very mild and manageable, not worth mentioning. So sometimes Singaporeans, we don't like to trouble people with additional
Oh, this is very
information.
true. This is absolutely
But
true.
I must say, for insurance, the approach should always be, when in doubt, disclose.
Yes.
Okay? Because if you don't disclose, then there can be a problem later on.
Okay.
So in this case, the consumer thought, not a big deal to me. I'm okay. So did not disclose. Later on, the claim related to some completely different medical condition, right? But diabetes is a very significant kind of condition that affects the insurer's assessment of risk, right? So under the law, the insurer is entitled to void the policy, which was what they did in this case.
Okay.
So it came to FIDReC, and then we did the mediation. There was a good outcome that both accepted.
Okay.
The insurer agreed to not void the policy, so the consumer could continue to be insured.
Right.
But they would impose some exclusion clauses in view of the revised risk assessment, and they would also revise the payment terms.
Okay.
They did not agree to pay out on the claim because of the failure to disclose.
Sure.
But the consumer accepted this arrangement at the end of the day because it was in their interest to continue having medical insurance
Right.
without having to go to a new company and do medical underwriting all over
Right.
again. And so this was the outcome in this case.
So that's the beauty of mediation, essentially.
Exactly.
Any other fine print that we need to be aware of?
I want to talk a little bit about travel insurance because this is another one
Oh,
which
yes,
is
please do, because
very
I'm flying
relevant
off
for
soon.
Singaporeans. So we have seen quite a number of travel insurance disputes arise because the insured was not clear about the benefits or the exclusions of the travel insurance policy. So for example, if you plan to go scuba diving somewhere, just bear in mind that scuba diving activities may not be covered
Correct.
by a plain vanilla kind of travel insurance, right? So this is something that's very important for travel insurance. Another thing about travel insurance is many people buy it maybe when they're sitting at the airport waiting for their flight.
Sorry, I've been guilty of that once. I've done it once.
Yeah, so just want to share that for travel insurance, there are certain benefits that can kick in, but only if you buy the policy earlier. Right?
Yes.
So for example, trip cancellations, natural disasters,
Correct.
things like that, if they might happen to disrupt your trip, well, you can protect yourself against those risks by buying your travel insurance earlier.
Yes, I've done that now.
And another important thing about travel insurance is some people don't realize it, but you must cover the entire duration of the trip.
Right?
Last year, we published a case study in our annual report where this consumer, they sort of filled in the wrong date. But they thought, not a big deal. I'm still overseas for that period.
Right.
But in the end, they had to make a claim because of some trip disruptions.
Okay.
And when they came to make the claim, the insurer said, actually, the departure date you told us in the form is not the actual departure date. And because of that, your entire policy is not valid.
Right.
The consumer felt it was very unfair because they felt that, well, the incident did happen in the period
Correct.
I did purchase, right?
Understandable, though. I can understand.
Insurance contracts are a very unique kind of contract. And what, ordinarily we might feel just minor changes, they can actually entitle the insurer to void the whole policy.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just pay attention to the details, right?
Yeah, don't make mistakes that some of us have made. Speaking from experience. Eunice, thank you so much for this sound advice. It really does make so much of a difference. I think it makes us worry less but be more alert at the same time. So thank you for coming down.
Oh, very welcome. And if there's any difficulty that consumers face with financial institutions, I'm glad for this chance to introduce FIDReC and let them know that there is this option.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So if you ever find yourself in any of these situations that we just talked about today, do not panic. Heed the advice from Eunice, and perhaps it's not too late to put in some mitigating measures to protect your finances. Very important, okay? Better yet, bookmark this episode for future reference. You never know you'll need it. And you can spread the word as well. That's it for Money Talks. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube Music. Do leave us a rating while you are there, please. And thank you. And if you've got any comments, we welcome them as well. Messages as well, send them through. We want to give credits to the team as well. Crispina Robert, Tiffany Ang, Junaini Johari, Joanne Chan, Hanida Amin, Saya Wind. I'm Andrea Heng for the Money Talks podcast. We'll see you next time.